Hello, and welcome to Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce Candidate Forum. My name is Bruce Carter, and I'm your moderator for the forum today. We're conducting these forums as a nonpartisan organization to create dialogue and discussion regarding the election. This is the second of three forums, and the forum today is for the riding of Saanich and the Gulf Islands. We'll start by introducing the candidates. We have Tim Kane from the Liberal Party, Robert Boyd from the Conservative Party, Elizabeth May from the Green Party of Canada, and Alicia Cormier from the NDP.
Hello.
I got it. So the format today will be opening statements, 1 minute for each candidate, followed by a long answer phase where each question will be directed at two specific candidates. They'll be given 1 minute each to answer that question. The other two parties will be given 30 seconds to answer that question, and there will be a 1 minute open discussion portion. After that, we'll go to a short answer. This is for all candidates. We have a maximum of 30-second response without a discussion period. Closing statements will follow that, and they'll be 2 minutes each. There are some rules. We've briefed the candidates on those, but I think it's worthwhile for you folks to know. Candidates will be encouraged to focus on the topic at hand. They're going to be asked to respect the time available. We do have a timer in studio to help the candidates with that. The order of the questions and statements have been drawn at random, and the candidates were not given the questions in advance. As the moderator, I reserve the right to cut the candidates off when their time is up, to ask follow-up questions, to allow another party named in a response to provide a rebuttal, and if necessary, make adjustments to the format to make all of this work. This session is being carried on Twitter. Staff are monitoring that feed. They will pass me questions from that Twitter feed. The Twitter hashtag for the event is YYJForum15. There is a bit of a time delay in the webcast to the Twitter. I want folks at home to know that. So if you're sending a question out on Twitter, please make it as clear as possible so the staff can pick up what that question is, perhaps even preference your post with question. So those are the rules. That's where we are. Let's begin. Start with opening statements, 1 minute each. Tim Kane from the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Bruce, and good afternoon. As I've been introduced, I am Tim Kane, the Liberal candidate in the Saanich-Gulf Islands. And over the course of my working life, I've had many jobs. I've worked on an assembly line. I've been a public servant, and I've started businesses and seen them grow. My company, Delta Media, for 25 years has created good jobs for many Canadians. But of all the jobs I've ever done, the one that I'm applying for now is the most important of all, the job of representing you, the people and businesses of Saanich-Gulf Islands. It's important because we can no longer afford 4 more years of a Harper Conservative government. There are two parties with legitimate hopes of forming a new government and replacing the Harper Conservatives. I'm running for the Liberal Party, led by Justin Trudeau. And here in Saanich-Gulf Islands, I'm your choice if you want to see a new tomorrow, a better government, a more fair government. I ask for your support as a member of Parliament in Justin Trudeau's team so that I can take on the important job to represent you, to achieve real change, and to build a better Canada. Thank you.
The next opening statement, 1 minute, Robert Boyd from the Conservative Party of Canada.
Great. Thank you very much, Bruce, for hosting us today and to the Chamber as well. My name is Robert Boyd, and I'm your Conservative candidate here in Saanich-Gulf Islands. I was born and raised in Saanich, and in my professional career, I'm a mortgage broker. Our economy is our #1 priority. The Canadian economy is stronger than that of other countries, but it is fragile and needs to be protected. With a $5 billion surplus so far this year, we're pursuing a low-tax, balanced budget plan to protect Canadian jobs and economic growth in the face of uncertainty. The ballot question in this election is simple. Which party is best able to manage and protect the fragile Canadian economy, your job, and your retirement in the face of global economic turmoil? Your choice has real consequences. The wrong government decision on taxes, spending, or deficits can upset our fragile economy, causing business closures, downsizing, or job losses. On October 19th, Canadians will head to the polls to elect a government. I ask that the residents of Saanich-Gulf Islands once again turn to the Conservative Party of Canada under the proven leadership of Prime Minister Harper. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Elizabeth May from the Green Party.
Thanks, Bruce, and thanks to the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. I also want to give a shout out to the Saanich Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, having had the enormous honor of being your Member of Parliament for the last 4 years in Saanich-Gulf Islands. I've worked closely with businesses, small and large, within the constituency. We have a vibrant business community, and we recognize that, as ever, small and medium-sized enterprises are the engine of growth in Canada, employing far more Canadians than any other size of business. So I'm proud that in the 4 years I've had as your Member of Parliament, I've worked closely with business leaders. I put forward a private member's bill to ensure that all government regulations and changes to fiscal policies go through an evaluation to see how they will impact small business. It's critical for Canada that we grow our economy, but do it in a way that respects and protects future generations. I will defend our coast, I will protect our jobs, and I hope to continue working as your servant for the people of Saanich-Gulf Islands.
Thank you. Alicia Cormier from the NDP.
Great. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you to the Chamber for this opportunity to discuss one of the most important elections in Canada's history. We are gathered on Coast Salish land of the Coast Salish, and for that I am grateful. I'm Alicia Cormier, your NDP candidate. I've lived in this riding since 1969, and I've worked and raised my family and volunteered in this community for over 30 years. I offer management experience in education, healthcare, small business, and social enterprise, and I've been twice elected as a municipal councillor in Central Saanich. I'm running in this election because I can no longer sit by and watch Mr. Harper dismantling the country that I love. I want a better future for my children, for my grandchildren, and for our community. I want to help form a progressive NDP government for the first time in Canada's history, with Tom Mulcair as our Prime Minister. Tom is ready to lead the government and to change Canada for the better, and I'm ready to devote 100% of my time to be your Member of Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move into the long answer portion of our day and have some fun. So the long answer, each question will be directed at two specific candidates, each be given a 1-minute response. The other two parties will then be given 30 seconds, and then there'll be a 1-minute open discussion where we can talk about what we've done. So the first question is for the NDP and Liberals who get the 1-minute responses. Question is, as a federal government, what will you make fares more affordable? Alicia.
Yes, what I would do as the MP for this area is join in with my colleagues and the other communities around us to lobby the federal government for an increase in the subsidy to the West Coast ferry system.
Thank you. Tim Kane.
Well, excuse me, I think there's a lot of agreement on that point. The ferry costs are too high in British Columbia, much higher than on the East Coast, and we must take action on that, and so I'm an advocate for that.
So we know that they're high. What are we going to do about it?
Well, you know, ferries are, in fact, a provincial responsibility. They may be federally regulated, as they are, and the federal government does subsidize to some degree. I would advocate for greater subsidies.
Thank you. Elizabeth Maple.
I think we need a bolder solution. We're still stuck in the transportation grid that we had of 1867 when the Constitution froze, and as those provinces on the East Coast came in, they got the protection of guaranteed ferry service. We need to have a transportation strategy that's national. And within the transportation strategy that's national, ferry service in BC must be recognized as an essential part of the transportation system and treated accordingly. It should receive full support from both federal and provincial governments.
Thank you. And Robert Boyd from the Conservative Party.
Thank you. I'm always a big believer in a little bit of competition, and I think BC Ferries could certainly use some. We made an announcement with Minister Duncan several weeks back in the middle of the campaign to commit some federal funding for a private company that would be coming in and bringing in foot passenger service between the island and downtown Vancouver. I think that's the start. I think that's certainly one way that the federal government can contribute in making sure that we keep fares low.
So, you know, we're now into that 1-minute discussion piece. I guess, you know, we committed money for a ferry from the Nanaimo to Vancouver. That's going to actually reduce the fares how in the Gulf Islands, in this riding?
Absolutely. We've been in discussions. The announcement was with respect to downtown Nanaimo and downtown Vancouver. We have been in discussions with the town of Sydney, as well as linking up the rest of the Gulf Islands to downtown Vancouver, and these discussions are ongoing.
There is a way to save money, and the pedestrian ferry service points to it. A lot of why BC ferry service is so expensive on the Gulf Islands is that it's moving cars. If we had more available water taxi service, and this is at the provincial level something Green Party leader Adam Olsen has been proposing, then we could cut the costs of the larger car ferries. But the reality of it is BC Ferries has been tone deaf to the needs of businesses on Saturna, on Salt Spring Island. The changes in the ferry schedules are going to disadvantage our business community as well as residents and employees. We have to fight for that. Even though it's provincial jurisdiction right now, we need to make the case for more federal funds.
Thanks. We're going to move on to our next question now. This question is for the Green and Conservative parties, so they'll get the 1-minute responses. So, significant changes in government direction or large national programs are a heck of a lot easier to announce than they are to implement. How do you go about delivering real value on the plans and programs that you propose?
The essence of the Green Party approach is that we'll do more by working together across party lines and across jurisdictional boundaries. So I think one of the core policies that I hope to see achieved is to create a Council of Canadian Governments where the federal, provincial, territorial, municipal order of government share seats at the table with First Nations, Métis and Inuit governments. Then we set a national goal, safer transportation, and all the governments around the table go back to their own toolboxes, their own sources of revenue, and pull in the same direction. Policy coherence and policy alignment will save the taxpayers. There's only one taxpayer. Why have all levels of government pulling in different directions? That's how you implement really bold programs and visions for Canada while saving money at the same time.
Thank you, Bruce. If you remember back in 2006 when this Conservative government took over from the previous Liberal government led by Paul Martin, that government had been, everything was their number one priority, to the point where nothing was getting done and the country was becoming stagnant. Under this administration, under Prime Minister Harper, we have been able to, I think, focus much more on the things that matter to everyday Canadians. Right now, that is the economy. Our economy is our number one priority. Our announcements throughout the campaign, for the most part, have been focused on making sure that we can protect our economy, protect our jobs, and ensure that we get through the current global economic turmoil.
Well, the economy is number one issue in many ways. But going back to Paul Martin's government, it was the Conservatives and the NDP that brought down that government.
So I guess the question here is...
And the Bloc.
And the Bloc.
The question here is, it's really easy to announce big programs. It's not so easy to implement them and actually deliver those to the taxpayer. And that's what I'm trying to focus on in this question. Can you help me with that?
Well, yeah, I can, because the leadership of Justin Trudeau is all about that. It's about cooperation, as Ms. May has said. It's about interjurisdictional cooperation, and the Liberal Party is committed to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Bruce. I think it's an important one. What I'm hearing is priority one is changing the government. And in order to implement any policy, you need to have the majority of seats in the government. So I think the NDP is well positioned to do that. And I would encourage Saanich-Gulf Island voters to commit to an NDP government so that we can move forward on some really great programs that will serve local business, communities, and families. And, you know, I feel for the Green Party because I've been in the minority on a local council, and you can have all the great ideas you want, but if you can't implement them, if you don't have the votes, it's not going anywhere.
So we're now into that 1-minute discussion bit. There might be some meat in there for some folks.
Well, I certainly say that I've been able, as your member of Parliament, to accomplish quite a lot. For instance, when I went in to see Joe Oliver, the conversation led to the funding that Victoria Tourism is now receiving to build up tourism in our shoulder seasons. I discovered, actually at a roundtable sponsored by the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce and the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, that under Stephen Harper, we stopped advertising any tourism in the U.S. market, our biggest market. I went to bat on that, and I got Joe Oliver to change his mind.
Can I jump in? Yeah, sure. Can I have some of the time? Because, yeah, that would be great. You know, I think, you know, the issues before us around climate action, around protecting our coastline, are going to take a government in order to take those steps. And NDP is best positioned to take.
So, Bruce, I want to say something here. You know, we are talking about priorities right now, and really only two parties that are sitting here today have had a chance of forming government in Canada. That is the Liberal Party, Mr. Kane's party, and my party, the Conservative Party of Canada. When you look at the previous government from the Red Book in 1993 that Mr. Chrétien ran on, he didn't deliver on national daycare, he didn't deliver on getting rid of the GST, and he didn't deliver on taxing the free trade agreement.
And I'm going to say this to all four of you is, we talk about delivering programs. We have this whole challenge as parties, and I've got all 4 of you in my sights now. Great plans moving forward that we've all announced that they're on the campaign trail, and we're going to have to take those, whoever we are, to Ottawa and implement them. And that is no small task. Just because we say we're going to have a national plan to do, and it doesn't matter what you put into it, you're going to have to get the bureaucracy to do that. I think there's some needs for being able to work within the government as opposed to outside as well. And that was where I was hoping to get to in the question. I've kind of dominated the piece. You know what? I'm happy to let you guys talk about that bureaucracy piece and how you make government work.
Well, I've been a public servant in Ottawa, and I know the value of a strong public service. And I've seen what's happening to our public service with Mr. Harper's cuts. That has to stop. We have to reinvest in our public service. We have to reinvest in science.
Right.
What we've done to scientists, and I mean, I'll stick at scientists because the cuts go further, the insults go further, and Mr. Harper has to be stopped.
So thanks. You know what? I'm going to stop there because I'm the guy who took us off.
I definitely agree with you. If we're going to make programs work, it takes collaboration.
Thanks. And I appreciate that. So we're going to move on to the next question. Make sure I'm not lost here. So this is for the Liberals and the Conservatives, in that order. Small business is the largest employer in Canada. What would you do to help grow small business? Tim Kane.
Well, thank you. As a small business owner myself for 25 years and more, I mean, I created my first business when I was 16 and 17 and have been in business ever since. I did spend 8 years as a public servant, but I know the importance of small business. Of course, it's important. It is, as Ms. May has said, and as all others have said, it is the engine of our economy. So, how do we do that? We invest in Canada. A confident country invests in itself. The Liberal plan to spend $125 billion in infrastructure over the next 10 years is going to invigorate small business.
Thank you. And Robert Boyd from the Conservative Party.
Thank you. We're going to cut EI premiums by 21% in 2017. We're the only party who's committed to cutting payroll taxes. The only other 2 parties that have a chance of forming government in this election have promised that they will be hiking the Canada Pension Plan premiums, which will kill jobs. Paul Martin himself said back when he was the Minister of Finance that payroll taxes are cancer on job creation. And he's right, and we agree. Small businesses can't afford right now, I think, either everyday Canadians or businesses themselves to be paying increased premiums on payroll taxes. So a cut to EI premiums by 21% starting in 2017 is going to be the first thing that we do in a re-elected Conservative government.
A Liberal government.
Hold on. So Alicia Stern, you'll get a chance in the discussion period to move forward with that.
Yeah, thank you. I would ask my colleague from the Conservative Party to take a closer look at the NDP's platform, because what the NDP is offering is a reduction in small business tax from 11 to 9%. The affordable daycare, childcare is going to help parents return to the workplace and know that their children are safe at home, and they're going to have more money to spend in our economy. The commitment to infrastructure is going to help municipalities move forward on some very needed roads and sewers and other things, and that's going to save on property taxes. So the NDP's platform is very business friendly.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to say that we want to be known as the party of small business. And we also, and I will say that Alicia's absolutely right, the NDP has the same proposal for tax relief for small business, moving from 11% to 9%. I mentioned in my opening the proposed legislation that I put forward that died on the order paper. I will reintroduce it. It's called the Think Small First Act, and it will ensure that all government regulations, fiscal measures, will go through an evaluation to see how they impact small business. We will also put forward a commercialization grant to help with venture capital for new clean technology.
Thank you. We now move into that discussion portion.
Well, I wanted to say that also the Liberal Party will reduce small business taxes from 11 to 9%. And we also, again, infrastructure investments for green infrastructure, for social infrastructure, and for public infrastructure. That will stimulate small business.
One of the things that the NDP is offering is an innovation tax credit that will help businesses come up with new ways that are environmentally and more efficient. And this is going to generate the knowledge economy, which we need to rely on. Canada is an exporting nation, and in addition to supportive of natural resources, we need to build our intellectual resources as well. And there's great great opportunities in the NDP platform to do just that.
We do need to move away from the rip and strip raw resource exploitation that ships raw resources, whether raw logs or raw bitumen, to other countries for processing. Creating more value chains within Canada helps build small business opportunities at home.
We were talking about how to help small businesses, and what we need to focus on really is are the proposals brought forward by the Liberal Party and the NDP with respect to payroll taxes. As Paul Martin said back when he was the Minister of Finance, payroll taxes are a cancer on job creation.
Thank you.
We are the only
Yeah.
party.
You know what?
that is
We're-
going
sorry,
to-
sorry.
No,
Listen,
you
this-
know
the
what?
CPP
Everyone gets the opportunity to talk.
Mr. Boyd,
I think that
CPP
I-
is not a payroll tax. CPP is an investment in our future.
Thank you, Mr.
The
Kane.
Conservative Party is the only party that
Oh,
is committed
all
to
right, okay.
reducing payroll
Guys.
taxes in this campaign.
You know, I'm going to ask you to try and respect the format and where we move through from here. We're going to try and do respectful communication. And you know what? As the moderator, when I tell you you're done, I'd appreciate it if you were done. So thanks.
Way better than Paul Wells.
You know what? It's good. We're having fun here. We're getting the information out. We'll try and make sure that we continue to respect each other as we move
I
forward.
think that's a good idea.
Okay. So the next question is for the NDPs and the Greens. They get the one minute responses in that order. The statistics on apprenticeship completion are very disappointing. What measures will you put in place to increase the number of apprenticeship completions?
Thank you, Bruce. Yes, the NDP recognizes that the Liberal and Conservative cuts to post-secondary education has had a considerable impact on student debt and on the lack of trained people in the workforce. We're looking to commit to 40,000 paid co-op, internship and apprenticeship programs and have significant funds that will be available to NGOs, to private sector, as well as all levels of government to create more apprenticeship spaces. And this is going to not only allow people to use the skills, but to gain that important experience that will enable them to move further in the employment ladder.
Thank you. And Elizabeth.
Yeah, we have a great example locally and what's being built up at Camosun College to encourage apprenticeships, encourage going into the trades. Trades are a really good option for young people, and I think too often that it's not fully understood that a career as a carpenter, an electrician, or a plumber is a satisfying, important contribution to society. But that said, Alicia's right, when you're looking at the student debt, people look at their student debt, and if they're not through their diploma yet, they haven't got their ticket yet, they get discouraged if the debt piles up. So we'll eliminate student debt, hold it to no more than $10,000 per student, stop charging interest on student debt, and we also are opening up and supporting more trade skill development programs to create more apprenticeship spaces.
Robert.
That plan sounds very costly to me. With respect to how we're going to deal with making sure that we're helping our young people get through post-secondary education, we have announced that we will be targeting, or pardon me, double the targeted Canada Education Savings Grants, which is for low and middle income families through registered education savings plans. As well, I just want to remind the folks out there today that both the Liberals and the NDP did oppose many of the things that we did bring in to help support students, particularly with respect to apprenticeship grants.
Okay. Tim Kane, apprenticeship completions. How do we do that?
Well, first of all, skilled trades, of course, are important. We're going to fund post-secondary education more fully is really the bottom line on that.
So I guess you guys have done a good job at shifting away to post-secondary education and funding that. But we're actually talking about apprenticeship completions. You know, and the challenge with those is really around getting your 4 years.
Yeah.
You know, jobs don't
Yeah.
last that long. People aren't able to finish, and they're not moving forward.
Bruce-
So I'm
Bruce,
wondering if you guys,
yeah.
we can just do a round, maybe in the order of the chairs
Sure,
around
yeah.
actual apprenticeship completions as opposed
Sure.
to.
Well, the NDP is committed to 10,000 affordable housing units. We know we need that in
Oh,
Victoria.
no, hold on.
And
No, not
those are
affordable
jobs.
housing units aren't apprenticeship completions.
Those will be built by carpenters and plumbers and electricians. That will qualify for the grants that I mentioned earlier about apprenticeship spaces. The infrastructure as well, roads and sewers, those will qualify for apprenticeship.
Thanks.
So there'll be lots of
Elizabeth.
opportunity.
Look, it's a mentor-apprentice relationship. We need to do more to support the mentors. The existing jobs that are being created by contractors and plumbers, when they have an apprentice, they need more support to keep that relationship going, to make sure that apprentice finishes to completion. So it's a very specific problem, but as I said, I think the Camosun model is going to really be exciting. They're working on setting up, but we would fund more apprenticeship spaces and support for
Thank
the
you.
person offering the apprenticeship.
Robert.
Thanks, Bruce. It was our Conservative government who did bring in the apprenticeship job creation tax credit, as well as brought in apprenticeship grants. The Liberals and the NDP both opposed those. So I think, talk is cheap, and tonight we're hearing a lot about what they're going to do,
Well,
but
today,
certainly they,
well, that's good.
they
Thanks,
opposed it.
Tim.
Probably because they were part of an omnibus
Yes,
bill that
okay.
was 600 pages long, and nobody could have the time to read it before the vote.
Well, the reality is that everything put forward where Robert is saying that other parties voted against it, there really was no choice. There have been measures that I've liked within large budget bills, but I can't vote for the measure I like because it's thrown in with a 440-page bill, and believe me, I may be the
Yeah.
only one who's read
Yeah.
all of them,
Yeah.
but I read them
Really.
and I study them, and I can't vote for them.
Right.
Really, Bruce, your question about apprenticeships is, the key is we're in a recession. Apprentices need work in the market. Those things are stalled. What the NDP's platform is doing is going to invest in communities and invest in business to kickstart and get things going again. So apprentices
Thanks.
will have the opportunity.
Appreciate it. We're going to move on to the next question. That was fun, and I think you guys were pretty respectful, so thank you. I appreciate that. The next question is for the Conservative and the Green Party in that order for the 1-minute responses. Negotiations with First Nations, in general, have been frustrating for all parties, I think, and they've achieved limited results. What would you do to achieve meaningful results in negotiations with First Nations? We'll start with Robert Boyd from the Conservatives.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. This is ongoing, as you said, challenge for every government. And governments are elected to represent the Canadian people, but we also have an obligation to consult with First Nations on any projects or with respect to their healthcare, education, and any of that kind of thing. I think that it involves sitting down. I don't think that we should be having negotiations in the media in front of cameras and lights. I think we need to be going and sitting down and being respectful towards one another.
Is there a way that we can change that process? I mean, we continue to do the same thing. Are we going to get any farther?
Bruce, it takes two, and I think we've certainly shown a willingness to cooperate. We need to see it coming from all sides, though.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
The reality is that First Nations have been sitting down quietly and in back rooms and trying to negotiate treaty resolutions for decades. The patience of First Nations in dealing with the foot dragging, intransigence, and bureaucracy around resolving land claims is truly astonishing. When you look at the Chilcotin, they went to court over a forest dispute. It was more than almost 2 decades by the time they got the decision from the Supreme Court of Canada. Now that we have that decision, that's the way forward. That's why we approach this with a new approach of a Council of Canadian Governments, a seat at the table for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. We need to take the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission seriously. So far, Mr. Harper has not responded to those recommendations. Every other leader of every other party in Canada, me, Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Mulcair, have responded and said we will accept the recommendations as they apply to the federal government. That's a first step, and Stephen Harper hasn't taken it. We need respect and we need reconciliation. It won't be easy, but we need to move forward and stop wasting the time and just spending money on lawyers.
Thank you. And Tim Kane.
Thank you. Well, I agree with that. And the Liberal plan under Justin Trudeau is to have negotiations at a nation-to-nation basis. And that's really the key to this reconciliation. And when I go back to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report and our understanding of that and our acceptance of that report, we also have to come to grips with our cultures and make sure that we are respecting their cultures and trying to educate our children in those cultures as well.
Thank you. Alicia.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. I've been the First Nations liaison in Central Saanich for a number of years now, and what strikes me is that the starting place is respect, and I think that the social programs for education, health, and housing is an area that the government needs to show leadership and needs to show that they care, quite frankly. And the other thing with First Nations is that so much of their resources have been to fight the federal government, both their resources physically as well as financially. And I think the latest court decisions creates a new path, and I think we need to start with respectful dialogue and addressing the social concerns.
Thank you. So we're into that 1-minute discussion. If we've got pieces that we want to do. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, absolutely. And the historic apology, I think Stephen Harper got was to have the apology on the floor of the House of Commons, an unprecedented event, and apologizing for the residential school system. But since that moment, the ball has been dropped on making sure that we improve First Nations education, that we improve housing, that we deal with the scandal of boil water advisories, even affecting First Nations hospitals. There is basically, the world looks at us and looks at First Nations communities and thinks, in a wealthy country like Canada, how can it be that these conditions are tolerated? We have a long way to go.
You know, I think the other real issue here is respecting the leadership and meeting on their terms. When I asked First Nations as a local government official, what is it that I need to do to start our relationship? And what they said is show up, be part of our environment, be part of our culture. And, you know, I've learned so much and I've gained the respect. And I think that the approach that has been taken that's been adversarial just isn't going to work. We need a new beginning.
Bruce, I mentioned health and education. I just want to mention to our viewers today that in terms of education, we've increased Aboriginal education by 25%. As well, since 2006, when we came to office, Aboriginal health funding has also increased by 31%. Alicia mentioned she mentioned respecting leadership. Well, I think that begins with making sure that we hold them accountable as well. We brought in an accountability act so that individual band members can see what their bands are spending throughout their communities. We were very strongly opposed, lots of opposition on that from the different parties, and I think it's something that is good for individual band members.
Tim, last words?
One of the things that the Liberal government would do would be to revisit the Kelowna Accord, an historic agreement that was near completion when the Conservatives and the NDP brought down the Paul Martin government. This had taken a lot of work, and I can't imagine how far we would have been along in our relationship, federal government relationship with First Nations, if that hadn't happened.
Yeah.
It'd be great to hear what the Liberals had to say about today going forward.
So we're going to move on now to the next question, because I'll tell you, I got more questions than I got time. So, so the next question is going to be for the Liberal and NDP in that order. Public sector infrastructure has a terrible reputation for being way over budget. If businesses did construction and infrastructure management the way that our governments do, they'd be bankrupt. What measures would you put into place to ensure that infrastructure construction represents good value and avoids wasting taxpayer dollars? I'll start with you, Tim.
That's a great question, and you're so right. So much seems to be over budget. But the problem is the specifications for the projects sometimes evolve. And so construction companies who take on one job, and then all of a sudden we've got politicians and designers saying, well, no, I want it this way or I want it that way. This creates changes, and it adds to the cost. I think we have to have a complete planning process that decides, and have the politicians and the community associations, et cetera, all stakeholders commit to the initial plan, to the final plan, and then let the construction companies or whomever go on and build that project.
Thank you. Alicia.
Well, my experience in business, both large and small, shows that there's efficiency to be had in both public and private sector, without a doubt. But I'm going to respectfully disagree. I did attend a workshop with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives about 6 months ago, and we had the benefit of the ombudsperson from Ontario come and show the results of the Triple P experience in Ontario. And in actual fact, the costs have gone way up because local governments have access to a really excellent lending rate. But once you involve private partnerships, that is no longer the case. So the interest alone is, and Ontario is moving back.
So, but we're talking about how we're going to control the cost getting overrun. Right?
Well, I think that's a sense of management and leadership.
And not PPPs is what I heard you say.
Well, the experience in Ontario is that costs were significantly higher, particularly because of the interest rate that local governments can achieve.
Thanks.
I agree with Alicia on PPPs, but I tell you what we need to do around public sector spending is transparency, because sunlight is a great antiseptic. And if you compare how the economic stimulus package after the 2008 financial collapse was rolled out in the US versus Canada, Barack Obama had a government website. Every contract tendered was online. Every bid was online. the way it was rolling out was transparent. In Canada, you can't track where any of that money was spent, and that leads to waste, inefficiency, and going over budget.
Thank you. Robert.
Elizabeth mentions the stimulus package that was brought in, the economic action plan brought in 2008, when we were having to go into deficit for the first time in a very long time in order to pay for massive infrastructure projects. It was called the Canada's Economic Action Plan. I think that we received very good value for money on it. In fact, this Conservative government has invested 3 times more than the previous Liberal government did in terms of infrastructure. That's something.
So what has this got to do with infrastructure construction and how we keep it from going over budget?
I think we are getting value for money for the things that we have done.
Okay. No, thanks. I appreciate that. So we're into the general discussion portion now.
I just want to get back to the transparency, because isn't it fascinating that you can't, we're in an internet age. You can put every contract online. Why not do that? It didn't happen in Canada. I asked Kevin Page, the parliamentary budget officer, he'd gone down to the US, to the Congressional Budget Office. And when he told them what we were doing, they were shocked, because what we were doing was nothing. We were not putting any of that information out there for the taxpayer to see.
Thanks.
Yeah, well, a Liberal government would be committed to transparency and openness in government. We have a full platform, and if you go to realchange.ca, you'll see that. Openness and accountability, expenses online, open government is what we propose.
So I'm going to move on now. We've finished the long answer portion, so we're now going to move to the short answer phase, and now is each candidate's going to be given 30 seconds. It's going to be a little less dialogue, but a little more focused, a little faster. We're going to rotate in the order of chairs and just move the start from one to the next. So the first question, we'll start with Robert, and then just keep moving to the right, because we're the chamber.
I was hoping for center.
Yeah.
Actually, the first one is a Twitter question. That comes from JJB59. And the question is, how will each candidate or each party solve the workforce housing issue so critical to business on the peninsula? So workforce housing, Robert.
Well, we announced our housing plan a couple days ago, and it involves a number of measures. The first is helping Canadians buy their own home. I think that if we're able to provide something for young families in particular to be able to get into home ownership, that is the first thing that we can do.
Thank you.
It's the #1 issue for the Saanich Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, and listening to them, I formed a multi-sectoral roundtable within the community to get all the different voices in the same space. The solutions are multi-jurisdictional. They involve municipal bylaws could be passed to create, as they did in Whistler, workforce housing, that the title runs with the property, and you must always have a section for workforce housing. Also making housing more affordable, which involves provincial and federal tax changes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think when we're talking workforce housing, we're talking about higher income earners. So I'm not going to talk about true affordable housing, but a portion of the 10,000 units that the NDP will finance will be market housing. But I think what's more important is that what we're looking to do is increase families' income by supplying quality childcare at $15 a day, by raising the federal minimum wage, which will set the bar higher for other employers as well. We're looking to increase the opportunities in the business sector so that jobs will be more available, higher paying jobs. It's an income issue.
Thank you. Tim.
Thank you. Well, I think it is about affordable housing. Just because one has a job doesn't mean that his or her family can afford housing. So the Liberal investment in affordable housing will help all people. It will add to the housing inventory, which will drive down housing prices and make it more affordable.
Thank you. So we're going to start now with Elizabeth on this question. What's the most important infrastructure project in this riding?
I think it has to be public transit. We're looking at where's the growth of greenhouse gases and the source of greenhouse gases on the Saanich Peninsula and the Gulf Islands. It's all about our transportation, our dependency on the automobile. For a lot of reasons, as we're an aging population, it's going to be great to have reliable, safe public transit that gets us from downtown Victoria out to Swartz Bay or to the airport or into Sydney to shop. We have to have public transit, and we'll put $6.4 billion a year into municipal government's needs for infrastructure, including public transit.
Thank you.
The NDP plan also provides for public transit, so I won't repeat that. But I think what's really important, and I've seen this firsthand in local government, is a federal partner that is committed with sufficient and sustained funding. Right now, local governments, in Central Saanich, we have a $4 million annual deficit between the infrastructure replacement and what we have in reserve. So what we need is a federal partner, which the NDP is committing to do, is to provide the funding that we don't have to compete with other municipalities. It's there, we can build it into our plans and move forward. And this is going to have a huge economic stimulus for the community.
Tim?
The single most important infrastructure project in our riding, I think, is transit. So public transportation is vital. Public housing and affordable housing comes a close second to that, because employers are demanding employees live nearby. Right now they can't. So some of the employees who work in Saanich are traveling all the way from Langford every day, clogging our highways, creating the Colwood crawl, and we have to move away from that.
Thank you. Robert?
Well, Bruce, there are two that I can think of. One is just outside of our riding. Of course, that is the Mackenzie Interchange. We have announced funding for that. As well, the second one, and perhaps more applicable to the people in Saanich-Gulf Islands, is, of course, sewage treatment. The federal government as well has committed funding to that. And we're just...
Doesn't this riding actually already have sewage treatment?
Right. The region as a whole.
Saanich,
The
there's
region as a
Saanich,
whole.
yeah.
Oh, there is Saanich.
Saanich
Sorry.
is
Saanich.
involved in the
Yeah.
sewage
Yep,
treatment.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
The municipality that I live in and call home certainly is still looking at doing that. I think we need to see some municipal leadership as well.
Thank you. So next question, we're going to start with Alicia, and this one is, how would your party attract more venture capital and angel investing for small entrepreneurs?
Well, that's a good question.
It's the chamber. It should even be expected.
Yes. Well, I think making the climate business friendly, a reduction in small business tax is going to encourage more stimulus. I think the innovation tax credit, particularly, what we're looking to do is transfer $240 million from the fossil fuel industry to a high-tech industry, which is a big component
So I'm
of
going
the
to try and
capital
walk this back a
region.
bit, and I'm actually going to give you a little more time, because I'm going to back up to the challenge that we have in small business, and I'm going to try and describe this one, is we have a great centralized banking system that is really solid and does some great things. One of the things it doesn't do well is lend to small business, right? So when an entrepreneur is out there looking for money, getting it out of the banking system is really tough. We're looking at, we need some sort of programs to be able to get money into the hands of small business entrepreneurs in order to start their businesses. I'm happy to give you another 20 seconds to do that.
Okay, good. Well, thanks. I did attend an economic development session in Nanaimo about a year ago, and there is significant interest in this area for high technology and new technology. And I think the federal government and the NDP would look at how can we make connections between the innovative startup companies as well as the other investors and bring federal money to that to partner and to move things along.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Tim?
Well, I've been in small business for a long time, and I've never had trouble getting money from our banks. I have a lot of respect for our banks. But I have a lot of respect for venture capitalists, because I know that they are funding the projects that the banks are finding too risky. So they have to be rewarded. They can be rewarded through a tax regime. Part of the Liberal policy is to have a tax regime that focuses on the future, on green technologies, and so there would be more investment in those. Canada would be a haven for green technology startups.
Thank you, Tim.
I'd love to see a thriving venture capital sector in this country. I think that is something that I think everybody here wants to see, but it's how we get there that is most important, and we need a low tax balanced budget plan to do that. I think this government is on the right track in that, and certainly whether it's through changes in the tax code or anything else in terms of regulations, I think that it's only a re-elected Conservative government that can be trusted to get the job done.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
We also have in our budget, which by the way is online, fully costed, and anyone can follow along with our platform and budget, money for venture capital, particularly around clean technologies and new technology. But the existing pockets of government money that can go to business must be sensitive to small business needs. If you have a granting program that says you have to have $1 million before you need $1 million before you can apply, that doesn't help a small business that needs $50,000. We have to scale it right so that the existing flow of capital to business is available for small business.
Thank you. So one more last question in this section, and then we'll move on to closing statements. That first closing statement will be by Elizabeth May, so just a reminder about that. So this one is very riding specific, actually, and we're going to start with Tim on this. And would you proceed to implement the proposed National Marine Conservation Area in the Gulf Islands?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is this was a Liberal proposal under the Environment Minister David Anderson, and it was brought down in the fall of the Martin government. So yes, it's an important step to protecting our coastal areas.
Thank you, Tim. Robert.
We have brought in a wide range of measures to protect our national park systems. With respect to the Gulf Islands, I think it's something that I would like to look at.
Elizabeth.
Actually, under the Conservatives, they had made a number of announcements that we were moving forward, but things keep stalling. So yes to a National Marine Conservation Area. It's twinning with the Gulf Islands Park. What we need to do is make sure it's a park reserve, so as we bring it forward, we're not violating any existing First Nations claims. There are a lot of competing claims there, and between provincial, federal, and First Nations negotiations, this is bogged down. It's a big plus to tourism. It does not mean you can't have fishing. It does not end commercial activity. It's really critical for our community to continue to bring in tourism dollars.
Thank you. Alicia.
Yeah, thanks you, Bruce. I've been quite involved with the Saanich Inlet Protection Society and other community groups on this issue. And, I think this is just a really good example where what you need is political will, and you need a government that's going to implement. This plan has been around for years, and work has been done. What stalled it is the next step is consultation with First Nations. And, what we need is an NDP government that will partner with the province and move it forward. And the NDP is committed to doing that.
Thanks. And you know what, a little bit of a moderator thing. I was a little fast on the one, so I've got another question for the group. So we're going to keep at it. And so, Robert, what incentive will you provide to co-op work terms? And I want you guys to be, I'm being very specific here. Co-op work terms.
Co-op work terms. So just if I may ask, so we're talking about someone who's going through post-secondary education and is...
I'm more than happy to say they're going to UVic or Camosun in one of the faculties, and they need to get 3 co-op work terms of about 4 months each in order to complete, right? Employers need to provide that work for them. They really should be paid to do that. What, if any, support are you going to provide for co-op work terms?
Well, I think this is something that needs to be left to the private sector. I think young people need opportunities, and sometimes there are situations where you take an unpaid co-op. I certainly had to do that. Many of my friends have had to do that. But the knowledge and experience that you gain throughout life is well worth it.
The Green Party believes we have to ban unpaid internships. They shouldn't be allowed. But by the way, the UVic, the incubator there, smart young people. I have a business leader in my community who does software development. He compared the price of going offshore to get the services from India with using UVic students. He paid them well. They did better work. He saved money. It was a good investment to use local co-op students. We need to promote the access for businesses to know that going offshore and outsourcing doesn't necessarily save you money. You're better off to use our students here in the peninsula.
Well, we've seen that the Conservative plan hasn't been working. We are in our second recession in this term, and what the NDP is offering, as I said earlier, is 40,000 paid co-op and internship positions. For example, healthcare, we're looking to invest significant dollars into healthcare for clinics, for new doctors, for home care and palliative care, and all of these opportunities will be made available for nurses and long-term care aides who can participate in a co-op program. So what you need is stimulus in the market, which is coming from federal incentives to move it forward and create the opportunities.
Tim.
Thank you. Co-op jobs and experiences are really important to our young people. There's no question about that. As the owner of Delta Media for 25 years, we had co-op students every year, several of them, and we paid them well. So the Liberal plan is to invest another $40 million annually to ensure that we have more co-op placements.
Thank you. That concludes the questions portions. We're going to move into closing statements. Just a reminder for the candidates, they're in the order of Elizabeth May, Robert Boyd, Tim Kane, and Alicia Cormier. These statements are 2 minutes long. Elizabeth, I invite you to your closing statement.
Thanks, Bruce, and thanks to Chamber. This has been a very innovative format. We didn't get to see everybody in the same room with us, but we hope you're enjoying us virtually out there in the virtual world of the Chamber. I have never been so honored in my life as to work for you for the last 4 years. As Member of Parliament for Saanich-Gulf Islands, I managed to get legislation passed for a national Lyme disease strategy. I brought money into the riding. The largest grant in the history of Western diversification to a university went to UVic for the Ocean Smart program, and that created jobs in our riding here in Saanich-Gulf Islands. I managed to get funding through Canada 150 for community projects. Working across party lines, even in what I have to admit people would see as a fairly hostile environment for a Green Party Member of Parliament in a majority Conservative government, but if you're willing to make those relationships and work hard, you can bring those resources into this riding. Imagine how much better it's going to be after Election Day when we see a minority parliament where none of the big parties have a majority of the seats, none of them have 100% of the power. And Green Party MPs, I hope to be joined by colleagues from Victoria and Esquimalt Saanich-Sooke, will be able to make a bigger difference by working respectfully, working hard, and working for you. We don't get confused by being told by some party backroom brass that we have to go out and kneecap the other guy. Our whole purpose is to work for the well-being of Canada, work to create those jobs for young people, work to help small business. My goals are your goals. I work for you, and I'd be very grateful and deeply honored if I have the opportunity to continue to work for you after October 20th.
Thank you. Robert Boyd from the Conservative Party, 2-minute closing statement.
Thank you very much, Bruce, and thanks again, of course, to the Chamber. It's certainly an honor to sit here with my fellow candidates from the other parties to talk about the issues that matter to Canadians. Election campaigns are an opportunity for us and for Canadians across communities right across the country to discuss and debate the important issues of the day, as well as to hold the government to account and to contrast and compare the various election platforms from the parties. Our economy is our #1 priority. The Canadian economy is growing. Today, it was announced that GDP in the month of July was up 0.3%, added to a very robust month in the month of June, with GDP numbers initially reported at 0.4%. All projections are saying that for the second half of 2015, Canada's economy will continue to grow. That said, the Canadian economy is stronger than that of other countries, but it is fragile and it needs to be protected. With a $5 billion surplus so far this year, we're pursuing a low-tax, balanced budget plan to protect Canadian jobs and growth in the face of global uncertainty. Since coming to office, our Conservative government has cut taxes every year. And we've cut taxes for all Canadians. In fact, the federal tax burden today is at its lowest level in 50 years. The typical family today saves more than $6,600 since when we first came to office. We did this, and we balanced the budget, not by raising taxes, but by growing the economy. The opposition parties have opposed us throughout the implementation of all of these measures. It is because of the proven leadership of Prime Minister Harper that Canada has been able to weather the storm and emerge as a world leader in job growth and economic growth. On October 19th, Canadians will head to the polls to elect a government. I ask that the residents of Saanich-Gulf Islands once again turn to the proven leadership of Prime Minister Harper and the Conservative Party of Canada to continue the serious work of protecting our economy, protecting our jobs, and governing the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Kane from the Liberal Party, 2-minute closing statement, please.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you to the Chamber for hosting this forum. I'd like to conclude by talking about the single most important issue in this election, and that is the one of trust. Canadians have lost trust in our government. Now, there are times when Canadians disagree with their government or disapprove or are disappointed, but this is the first time in my experience when I've seen that Canadians have come to distrust our Prime Minister and our government. There are only two parties with legitimate hopes of forming a new government and replacing the Harper Conservatives. It is my hope that on October the 19th, you will support the Liberal Party led by Justin Trudeau. In every fiber of his being, Justin Trudeau is a principled person. A Liberal government led by Justin Trudeau will take down the barriers between the federal government and the provinces, between the federal government and First Nations, and between the federal government and municipalities. We'll see a new spirit of partnership and cooperation that's been missing for about 10 years. We've almost forgotten what that looked like. The Liberal Party and the Liberal plan is to run a deficit so that we can invest in building a strong green economy. Our plan will help businesses, it will create jobs, It will help the middle class and those who are working hard to join it. Economists say that this is the right time, with interest rates as low as they are. It's the right decision. This is a bold step forward so that Canada can take its place in the 21st century world. Canadians deserve real change. We must have a government that we can trust. And I'm asking you to vote for me to make this a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the final closing statement, Alicia Cormier from the NDP Party.
Okay. Thank you, Bruce. And thanks for the opportunity today. My proposition to you is very simple, it's very clear, and it's very achievable. The challenges facing our country are numerous, and the solutions are long overdue. The need for fine speeches and for promotion has passed, and we don't have time to build a new political movement. We need to act now on so many fronts: economic, environmental, as well as social. If we really want to change our national government for the better, with a clear mandate for progressive change, the best chance we have right now is to elect an NDP government with Tom Mulcair as Prime Minister. He is ready to make change in Ottawa. The NDP's plan will invest in affordable housing, childcare, transit, infrastructure, healthcare, and tourism. We will reduce taxes for small business and provide incentives for innovation in manufacturing and our transition to a low-carbon economy. Our plan will kickstart the economy and help small businesses and middle-class families today and for the long term. This plan is balanced and it's sustainable. Mr. Trudeau's plan is not. Tommy Douglas balanced 17 consecutive budgets and brought in universal Medicare. He showed us that when governments are focused and choose to live within their means, great things can get done. As a management professional, a community activist, and a locally elected official, I understand the needs of our community very well. And if you elect me as your MP, I will dedicate 100% of my time to deliver on the NDP platform commitments and to stand up for Saanich-Gulf Islands. The bottom line is that the time for advocacy has passed. We need to act now to replace Harper and the Conservatives. To form an NDP government, every seat counts, including Saanich-Gulf Islands, and every vote counts, including from each one of you here today. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the Chamber and everyone, I'd like to thank you very much for participating in the forum today.
Thank you.
I know how busy you guys are, and I appreciate your taking the time. As well, I want to thank you for making the personal commitment to run for public office. Our democracy depends upon people going out there competing and doing this. I know it's not easy, so thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce.
We're pleased to host these web forums. We've hosted this is the second one. I guess we're just about done. The next one will be the Victoria riding tomorrow from noon to 1 p.m. On behalf of the Chamber, I'd like to thank everyone for watching and being involved in Twitter. I encourage everyone to continue the discussion, be that on Twitter or a cup of coffee with your neighbor. Talk about the elections, talk about the issues that are important to you. Remain engaged, and most importantly, get out to vote. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you.